Hi, here from Copenhagen, where we're still streaming live from Copenhagen Fashion Week. Today we've launched this new digital jewelry experience, and we have a lot of fun stuff coming up right now.
We're truly proud to introduce this webinar that will enlighten you on innovation and acceleration within sustainability. And for that, we have gathered some of the best experts here, and we found them from different places around the world. So I think I'll just head it over to Adorn Insight and co-founder Maya, who is a part of the Jewelry Intelligence Agency and who's gathered experts to enlighten you in this subject. Looking so much forward to follow it, and Maya, I'll give the word to you.
Thank you very much, Pernilla, for that really warm introduction and for inviting us to be part of the Jewellery Room's inaugural virtual experience during Copenhagen Fashion Week. It's so great to be part of this journey into the digital realm, and I'm sure it's the first of many such successful ventures to come. If consumers were increasingly being drawn to responsibly operated brands before COVID-19 struck, the global pandemic has, for a multitude of reasons, accelerated this shift in mindset. So across multiple sectors, we're witnessing innovation happening at pace as brands are harnessing new technologies, they are rethinking production and retail models, they're even adapting their messaging to engage with customers for whom things like transparency, authenticity and purpose are becoming really the new non-negotiables. So in this webinar, we're going to look at a variety of really fascinating ways in which this innovation is being implemented. Now, fundamental change can, of course, be complex and it can be resource intensive. So the purpose today is definitely not to daunt, although I sense I may be challenged by some of our panelists today. But really the idea is to sow some seeds, start a conversation and to inspire brands to think outside of the box when they're considering where and how they can make meaningful change in order to thrive. So, if anyone has a deep insight into luxury jewellery, it's Nicholas Liu. After graduating from London's Royal College of Art, Nicholas lent his creative vision to numerous luxury brands, including Georg Jensen, Louis Vuitton and Tiffany & Co., where he was the Director of Design for High Jewellery and Custom Design. Last year, Nicholas launched his own collection of remarkable jewels under the brand name Mr. Liu, and these days he is based in Hong Kong. By her own admission, our next panellist, Jodie Muter-Hamilton, has spent years striving to find out what sustainability means for the fashion industry. And I believe that this is a sector that the jewellery industry can really look to and learn from. So Jodie is the founder of Black Neon Digital, which is an independent editorial and podcast platform. It's also now a consultancy that helps businesses to build brands with integrity. The very busy Jodie is also a partner and communications director at Fashion Roundtable, where she works to ensure that UK fashion is valued by policy leaders as a powerful economic and creative industry. Last but by no means least, Marina Elenskaya is the founder and co-founder and editor-in-chief of one of my personal jewellery obsessions, which is Current Obsession, the Netherlands-based jewellery magazine and platform known for its experimental approach and unconventional style. So what I really love about Current Obsession is the way that it showcases new ways of presenting and experiencing jewellery, which I think is so important in this sort of brave new world that we're entering. They also champion exceptional designers and makers and artists, and they do that through collaboration with renowned brands, cultural institutions and events such as Munich Jewelry Week and New York City Jewelry Week. So without further ado, let's jump in. So given that we're in a virtual jewellery experience today, it seems very apt that we should start with digital transformation and what it is meaning for sustainability within the jewellery industry now and going forward. During lockdown, we've all seen numerous digitalised solutions emerge at pace. So they're allowing brands to reach new audiences, they're allowing them to create new retail opportunities, to tell stories, without, I think, specifically for this presentation, without the need for physical footfall. So there are kind of sustainable implications there, even if that wasn't the original intent. We've also seen the interesting rise of digital fashion brands on social media. I saw one yesterday and the strapline was, "We waste nothing but data and exploit nothing but our imagination," which I thought was clever. So Nicholas, if I could start with you, one of the things we saw last month was how various luxury brands they resorted to digital solutions to unveil their high jewellery collections. Some of them were quite innovative. They also eliminated that need for actual physical travel. So I wanted to ask you, given your experience at this level of the industry, what are your thoughts on this kind of approach? Can Nicholas hear me?
Hi, Maya. Thank you for digitalization will. Yes, I can hear you.
Good,
Hi.
good. Hiya. You froze a little bit.
Hi. Thank you. I think digitalization will create new ways of showcasing jewelry as people travel less. For example, you have Spark AR. It's a Facebook company, and they've developed a technology and filters so you can try on jewelry using your phone. A few companies and designers have already used this technology to launch collections during the pandemic. It's to tune different skins you can adorn on video games.
Okay.
The only thing is, I feel that when you reach certain price points at high jewelry, it does require touch. And at certain price points, people do want to come in and try on the jewelry.
Okay. Yeah, we saw that with some of the luxury brands. It seemed that the initial showcase was virtual, but then if people wanted to buy, there would be a concierge that would travel with the jewelry. But broadly speaking, it sounds that there is some potential there for this kind of technology. Thank you, Nicholas. Marina, what about you? I know that Current Obsession, like I said, showcases new ways of presenting and experiencing jewellery. So for you, what role are you seeing digital assuming, and what are your thoughts about it?
I think it's the lockdown really showed how artists are seeing digitalization and filters, AR, as a really new, exciting, creative way to show and also expand their their branding. And I'm looking at many artists that use filters and use face masks and those things to really further like their reach and create an audience that is outside the jewelry bubble. And so I find that really exciting. However, of course, there's a kind of a concern of how to monetize the filter, right? So how do you jump from creating something really beautiful that anyone can try, which is kind of opposite from like luxurious jewelry that you can't put on maybe so quickly. You have to first go to the store, you know, those things. But then how do you go back to really earning a living? So I think that's really coming because I feel like social media platforms are really willing to accommodate those things. So I think quickly also you would be able to purchase filters and those things. So I think it's quite exciting.
So exciting. I do too. And how about you, Jodie? What innovations perhaps are you seeing in the fashion industry that we can learn from or be inspired by, if any?
I think it's twofold for me. So firstly, it's consumer experience, which is what we've just been talking about. And then secondly, it's traceability and assurance of a product. So, you know, we've seen jewelry for years have the Kimberley process, for example. That's no different to what we're seeing in a way in fashion, which is all around blockchain and traceability and assurance of a product and knowing what it's made from, its journey, who's its owner's been, you know, authenticity. Say you have a Louis Vuitton handbag, you know where it's been, you can track and trace it essentially. I think what's really exciting in terms of kind of a consumer experience is actually where we see one-to-one discussions over an item. So it becomes less about playful kind of iterations and more around advice and advising people on what to buy one-to-one through perhaps video chat and so forth. And we've seen this in the fashion industry with magic mirrors, perhaps, where you can sort of try on your lipsticks and nail varnish. And also it's quite popular at the minute in the beauty industry because, for example, foundations are very hard to buy online because you don't know your skin color. So you can actually use an app to kind of put a skin color on you. And I think that's quite interesting. But in terms of sustainability, you know, the track and trace and authenticity piece is what particularly excites me with the jewelry industry, I'd say.
Gosh, so there's boundless potential, really. I think one of the things I really enjoyed was the University of the Arts London Jewellery Showcase, when the jewellery graduates showcased their collections. And, you know, there was one where it was all completely animated so the jewellery could morph. And of course, you know, that doesn't necessarily have practical extensions in the real world, but it's just fascinating to see the bounds of how we present and represent jewellery changing. Okay, let's move on. Another thing that I'm quite interested in, and I know that you guys are from knowing you over the years, is material innovation. So, material innovation, of course, can assume a multitude of different facets. It can be renewable biomaterials, it can be recycling and upcycling, it can be unorthodox combinations of precious and non-precious in jewellery. And really what's interesting, or what I'd love to talk about a little bit with you guys, is how, the potential for material innovation to introduce a greater level of sustainability into product development. So, Marina, if I could start with you. Again, a lot of the brands and the jewelers that you showcase and the artists on Current Obsession have some very unorthodox approaches to material, or they use unexpected things. And I wondered, again, from a sustainability point of view, what's standing out for you, or what has impressed you of late?
I think what I love about jewelry artists, and that they are really sensitive to sort of political and socio-economical problems that are happening, and they respond quite quickly because it is a small production. And in a way, what I love is not maybe even material innovation, but more sort of material activism. It's a way to use your voice as an artist, use your platform, use your following to really focus in a creative way to really focus on certain issues, right? So there's so many artists coming out now talking about, throw away a culture that we have right now, Anthropocene, like how do we impact the environment around us? How also even people talking about their backgrounds, where they're coming from through their jewelry, and then through creative work that is so beautiful and crafted, really drawing attention to these issues. So I think that's the kind of ethical, more than material approach, I love that.
It. Yeah, love it. Thank you. Lovely answer. Jodie, I know this is an area of interest to you as well. What are your thoughts, and could you share any interesting examples again?
Yeah. Thank you. Yeah, I totally agree, actually. What's really interesting for me is kind of when we look to meaning. So meaning, value, worth, and sustainable. And when these things begin to mix up, it becomes quite exciting. Last week, I chaired a webinar that Maya joined, which was all about London College of Fashion's MA Fashion Futures. And one particular girl, Aniela Fiedler, basically she proposed this idea of meaning and making diamonds out of something that's meaningful to us. So could that be your mother's cake? Could that be your childhood teddy bear? Can we create this in something that is more meaningful than something we have no emotional connection to? And when we start to think about worth and value and waste, and kind of, where these, perhaps if we're talking about diamonds, for instance, come from, and you think about the conditions in which they come from, where they're mined, etc., who has to mine them, what value do you attribute to that meaning, and is there something more personally meaningful to you? And I think the value and worth and kind of what we perceive as worth is interesting to perhaps look back at as an industry and renegotiate, because worth is something that a company has potentially put on something. It's not necessarily what we believe is worth. And I know, for example, Nicholas, you've obviously done all your Sotheby's kind of, piece, and I'd just be interested to find out about worth perhaps there as well. I don't know.
Me too. Do you want to take that one, Nicholas?
No, I'm totally with you. As a creative, I support material innovation, and it's really good to see companies using unorthodox materials. Also in the high jewelry sphere, you have aerogel and the latest Boucheron high jewelry necklace. But to your point, how sustainable are these materials? Even by using these precious materials behind that material that causes some form of environmental damage, unless the materials are genuinely sustainable. I feel the use of new materials and innovation sometimes can be more of a marketing tool, unfortunately, and not a genuine investment in the future of sustainable materials.
Very interesting. Yeah, I sort of question the same things. When I had spoken to you about this originally, Nicholas, I was thinking, oh my God, these collections, they include straw and they include wood, and, you know, it's kind of renewable, etc., etc. And then you kind of threw that one back at me that perhaps it's not so authentic. I suppose my hope is that even, you know, even the representation of these materials that are not necessarily seen as precious will somehow make, you know, evolve the consumer mindset a little bit, so they're more amenable to seeing preciousness in non-finite materials such as precious metals and diamonds. I did have one final question for you on this topic, Nicholas, because recycling, you told me something interesting about, you know, at the level that you're at in the industry, what it is for people to, you know, is recycling a consideration at all?
Different kind of levels of recycling. So luxury clients are reworking existing pieces that contain a large center stone. For smaller items of jewelry, clients are repurposing. For example, a brooch, which is out of fashion, can now become a ring. This is a good way to repurpose and reuse. What is not cost effective is to reuse the pavé diamonds in a piece and reset the diamonds in something else. So a lot of understanding to do this, and in the end, you know, there's a lot of risk involved in unmounting the stones, and to reuse all the diamonds, it's a lot of labor.
Okay, that's really interesting. I had not been aware of that. So yeah, I think it's interesting also for our audience to hear that there are always limitations. But I do love the idea again of repurposing old pieces, because it comes back into the story and the meaning as well, doesn't it? So we're evolving the meaning of the piece. Okay, super interesting. Thank you. Moving on again, we have, I wanted to talk a little bit about sustainably minded retail models and business practices, which I think we can all agree were gaining traction, you know, way before COVID struck. So, and I wonder, I think they're probably changing and evolving sort of as we come through this, but things like rental, resale, B corporations, the list goes on. Certainly, we've been noticing that anti-excess minded consumers are certainly favouring brands that maybe think smart, reduced waste and drive efficiencies across their supply chains. So, Jodie, how are you seeing this repurpose, reuse, reduce movement evolving?
I think what's interesting to consider is that at the moment, completely nailed the reuse, recycle kind of loan model, as it were, rental model in the fashion industry. Because there's a lot of different parameters that we can play with. So is it subscription model? Is it a one-off? How do you do this? How do you repair or wash or, you know, kind of deal with the items? And there's been something that said that only peer-to-peer rental is something that's actually sustainable, where you don't use couriers, for example. You walk in your vicinity or location and take it to someone. Because if you imagine the garment miles that you're putting on a single item, is that sustainable? Is that not? So how do you actually understand what sustainable is within in a reuse model like that? What's interesting is probably about 8 years ago now, I mentored a young lady, Sophie Moore, who had a business called The Folly, and she was the first ever world jewelry rental company. And it took a long time to get traction for her, and actually she was too early in the market. And about 9 months ago, she actually sold that on to My Wardrobe. So now that's gone on to My Wardrobe, which is a fashion rental company, and they release the jewelry. So, you know, it's taken a good 7 years for that to embed in people's mindsets. And I think, you know, there's also other questions with jewelry around hygiene and things like that. Do people want to actually wear someone else's earrings, for example? So, you know, the hygiene factor is quite high, and that could come across also different cultures, how it reuse, repurpose across culture, and how that is for them too.
I think, Jodie, the full disclosure, you and I live quite close to each other, so we can certainly meet up and swap our jewellery with very low impact solutions. Yeah. I'll call you after the talk. Nicholas, same thing. Is there anything you would like to add on this point?
Yeah, the resale market for jewelry is a great way to support the industry, and definitely judging by online jewelry auctions and the frequency to which new sales are coming out monthly. These and Sotheby's both have online jewelry coming out every month. What I would like to see is larger brands program and refurbished section. Apple has a small selection of refurbished iPads for sale.
Okay. Fascinating. Wow. And Marie, sorry, Nicholas, Nicholas is breaking up a little bit. Did you finish?
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay, sorry, this connection is slightly glitchy. Thank you, Nicholas. Marina, what about you? The same question, really. I'd love to know a little bit about, I suppose the jewelers you focus on also present quite, create quite small scale and that kind of thing. So yeah.
Absolutely, yes. And of course, the contemporary jewelry practices are less impactful. Nevertheless, I think it's still important to, trace back and to question the materials you use and question your suppliers and kind of like do better. But what I also find really interesting, I think contemporary jewelers are very scrappy. So everyone I know always saves their gold dust and reuse tiniest pieces and putting them back. But also there's even a very creative approach. I just wanted to mention, I think it's really cute. So back in 2006, Lisa Walker, she's a New Zealand artist. She actually used sweepings off her floor in the studio, which look like this.
Oh, wow.
and created an entire collection, not just gold sweeps, not just like leftovers of her metals, but everything. So, and she works with a lot of different materials, just put them together and sort of also, again, showing, a point, making a point of, okay, how scrappy do we get? Let's make jewelry out of trash. So yeah, I like that.
Fantastic. I mean, I do love also, I think that we're, there's a lot of debate about whether people are going to have money to invest even in jewelry now. And depending on which, I think that debate is polarized and not one for right here. But I definitely think we're seeing an increasing shift towards buying investment pieces and buy less, buy better. So people may not be buying the kind of cheaper throwaway jewelry, but maybe saving up to buy, a really beautiful piece that has meaning embedded in it. So I feel quite excited. Yeah, I mean, I'm always an optimist about these things, but I think what's nice about this panel is that we're also being realistic as well. These are our kind of optimal objectives, but there are signs out there that it seems to be that's consumers are getting more savvy in the way that they invest. And they probably will have more disposable income for some of them if they haven't been traveling, for example. So fingers crossed. Okay, we're seeing a real revival as well in craftsmanship, which is essentially, I guess you could say that we would view that as quite consistent with the principles of sustainability. Now, again, this is not a new thing. We've been seeing luxury brands really looking at craftsmanship and showcasing their artisanal capabilities for some time now. And again, during lockdown, I was seeing, the likes of McQueen or Loewe doing studio tours and behind the scenes tours and encouraging viewers to embroider and craft, etc. So I think that's exciting. We're also seeing, I believe, a rise in support for kind of independent jewelers and jewelry brands. I think that's where interest is lying. So I wondered if you guys would like to elaborate a little bit on that. Do you agree? Is that something that you're also seeing? And if not, also say so. But what do you think we can learn from it? Does it herald good things? Oh, Marina, would you like to start with that one?
Well, I wanted to say that I am also a trained jeweler by, my original education. And when I started Current Obsession, I really observed around me a big gap between, what you're taught in school and how this idea of like a market and is perpetuated that you should show in a gallery. This is how it works. And then there is a certain gap in catching up with that reality, with that it's not that easy and it's not so easy to reach out to craftspeople to outsource work or to show work and those things. And we found it really problematic. So now we at Current Obsession started talent development program Gen Z, which is this a kind of, you own Gen Z. So with young designers who are just graduated within the last 5 years, trying to find ways to produce their work, high quality work. So what we're trying to do is basically use our network to plug them in with production facilities, with also, curators, writers, so that position their brand in a way. And I think it's very important not only to think about financial gain, but also being generous in your network. So what we don't have much money to give, but we have a network that we could share. So we could just kind of introduce people to each other and see if something could work out. And I am really excited to see also a lot of jewelers looking at old craft techniques like glass blowing and stone setting and engraving, and wanting to reach out to craftspeople and work with established facilities that can accommodate their designs. So I am quite excited about the outcome. So fingers crossed it will be a nice things to see in 2021 when we'll release the work.
It sounds so exciting. I can't wait to see it. I mean,
Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, it's super exciting. Jodie, same broad question to you. What would you like to say?
Yeah, I think craftsmanship is obviously hugely in the fashion industry as well. But what's interesting for me to unpack is, what do we mean by craftsmanship? So, there's not that many people, unless you're Chanel Atelier, that physically spend hours upon a garment. And in the UK, we have factories, so people that actually physically sew garments, and they're not necessarily considered craftspeople, they're considered machinists. So for me, we need to start to value the people that are actually making garments and also jewelry. I know that people spend hours and days and they're just stone setters. Now, are they the designers, or are they considered manual labor? Like, where do we start to draw the line between craftsmanship and what's important in that, and who are we actually paying for this craftsmanship? Because is it the house we're paying, or is it the craftsman? And do they get paid £15 an hour if you're a machinist, or are you getting £1,000 for a piece that you've made in Manhattan? It's quite interesting to just kind of pull apart those in, what is craftsmanship ideas, I think.
So do you think there's, say I'm a smaller independent jeweler who's very sort of artisanal in my approach, do you think that there is a case for more transparency in a brand's messaging, for example? Does that become part of the story that you tell on your website? Or if you're not so small and you're claiming to be, craft-based, but not really, I guess we get into issues of transparency. Do you think that, would you agree with that?
I think I would like to see the people paid fairly who are actually making the items as well as the brand. And I think if you're an independent jeweler, you can make your product and you can spend hours on that, and you can cost it and understand where your money's coming from, why your price point has to be a certain way. But, if we're talking about craftsmanship as a valuable asset, then we need to pay the people who are actually using their hands to create these desirable objects, in the right way. That there's lots of different ways we can do that, but it's around storytelling about value in the actual craft and knowing who the people are to make these things. For example, Mulberry did a really good example of how they kind of machinists and leather workers actually into Bond Street, and you could meet them and things like that. So in the Mulberry Made to Last scheme. So there's lots of ways you can do this, but I think remembering who makes the actual items is quite important.
Yes, thank you. Nicholas, would you like to add anything on this point?
Yeah, I do think there's a rise in support for independent jewelers, also because it's the new dawn for gender identity. People are looking to adorn themselves with jewels that speak to their chosen gender. The large brands may not have been able to speak to their individual needs. So I feel people are turning to independent jewelers to seek out unique and specific as to how they dress and how they live their life. The consumer, they're no longer just buying a piece of jewelry, but they're also buying into the jeweler's story and the ethics. People are voting with their dollar and choosing to support independence as a way of showing support to their community.
Thank you. That's so interesting. I hadn't even considered that point about identity and maybe people gravitating to a new breed of jeweler. So that's super interesting. Thank you, all of you. Okay, last question or last point, which is a kind of closer, and let's round things up. But I was reading actually at the weekend, and I had sort of surmised this anyway, but that brands which are able to demonstrate transparency about their impact are currently among the fastest growing. So what I guess I was thinking about was that this potentially makes sustainability not just something that we have to do on a sort of moral, ethical level or consider, but actually is it potentially quite an important business strategy that brands can leverage to boost business and grow business? With this in mind, I wondered if each of you would be able to describe for example, your ideal sustainable outcome in jewelry, and what would you recommend a brand focus on? I mean, I said at the beginning, this whole transformation towards sustainability can be big and daunting. So I personally I think it's okay if a brand can only claim to be sustainable in parts of the business. It's better than nothing, but I'm happy to be challenged. So Jodie, do you want to kick off with that one?
Sure. I think for me, it's kind of a 3-step transition process. So we have understanding what you're making and being transparent around that. It's then basically elevating what you're making and making it impactful, and then putting it back into the cycle so that you can create a bigger impact or, social impact. So it's like thinking about, breaking those down into different ways and sort of looping it all back in again. So you're not just only making something that's taking from the earth and labor intensive, resource intensive, and then selling it and you're actually creating a feedback loop that is beneficial to the people that are making it and the earth. So, we can't really regrow diamonds, but we should start to think about how we can to tree in the jewelry world.
Yeah. Well, that takes us into lab-created diamonds, but perhaps that's a debate for another day. I know you touched on it a little bit there, but it's such a, I was going to say it's a minefield, but that's a terrible play on words. Nicholas, how about you? What are your hopes for the jewelry industry, or in terms of sustainability, where would you recommend that brands maybe focus their attentions?
I would encourage brands to simply produce less collections and less per collections. Consumer needs to be retrained to a more sustainable shopping cycle, and we need to re-educate people to buy quality and let people understand that quality stands the test of time. The quick fix is paper goods. Simply put, packaging, and especially with high jewelry, it normally comes in a box, in a box, in a box. Do we need such elaborate packaging? And also when doing pop-ups and temporary shows, incredible amount. I'd love to see them build sets that can be reused at a everyday event. And I'm not saying this is possible, but just thinking out there, instead of shipping jewelry around the world, how about a network of local workshop artisans who are able to make the same piece of jewelry? So you not only reduce the shipping carbon footprint, but you also generate local jobs, giving directly back to the community that is jewelry. So for example, what if jewelry in Hong Kong was made in Hong Kong? Party jewelry in New York was made in New York.
Absolutely.
What a great idea. Marina, I'm going to let you round things up. What would you like to add?
No pressure there.
No pressure. Well, I'll really round it up, but you go ahead.
All right. Well, the way I'm looking at the latest events, the social unrest and such issues that are popping up otherwise, and seeing how brands react to it. And what I think is very important is a real urgency or relevancy in work that is not just made because you keep making or you have some stuff like left over that you just keep creating, but it needs to, I think a client now is so attuned that they also need to understand, why is this a product that you're offering, right? And so I think the urgency and relevancy would be the first thing that I'm looking at, as well as dialogue and transparency. So as Jodie also mentioned, being open about what it's made of, why it's made, but also talking about addressing the client directly. I think people really appreciate that, being part of the process. So I think ideally I would like to see more of that in brands and artistic practices.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Well, that really rounds up the the webinar today. I just really wanted to thank the three of you, Marina, Jodie, Nicholas. It's been, I'm really so delighted that you could join us on this. It's been a real learning curve for me as well. So It's really good. Thank you so much to Pernilla and Charlotta at the Jewellery Room, of course, and Mark, the tech guy who made this all happen. And then I think Pernilla maybe said at the beginning that we're not going to take Q&A now, but I believe there's a box that people can type their questions in, and then the Jewellery Room will forward those to me, and perhaps I could forward them to you guys if there's anything that you might be able to add to. How does that sound?
Great.
Fine. Good.
Awesome. Thank you so much. It's good to see all of you. And
Bye.
have a lovely afternoon. Take care.
For the invite.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank
thanks,
you.
Ryan. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.